everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'm going to look at Hicksville by Dylan Horrocks. It's a book I picked up recently at Second and Charles. They had a buy 5 used books, get 5 used books for free sale. That's why Second and Charles is my favorite store in the world. They have a ton of used graphic novels and manga and new books as well. And they offer really good deals. So I waste way too much money there, but hey, I'm getting good deals at least. I have prior read Sam Zabel and The Magic Pen by Dylan Horrocks and enjoyed it. It freaked me out because I felt it was resonant with what I was experiencing in Strange Death of Alex Raymond. It had a key word in it that was like a clue to me to look further into a book, and then on the surface was very thematically related to what I was experiencing with Strange Death of Alex Raymond. So if you've read Strange Death of Alex Raymond, definitely go check out Sam Zabel and The Magic Pen by Dylan Horrocks. And Sam Zabel is actually a character in Hicksville, which was a pleasant surprise to me. And then this book is kind of like Strange Death of Alex Raymond, or Matt Madden's Ex Libris, where it's like you kind of go down this reality hole. Reality hole. I meant to say rabbit hole, but reality hole of comics within comics and comics. It's like a Russian nesting doll. I think they're the matryoshka dolls, those nesting dolls. So that's kind of what this book is. I'll try and explain as much of that as possible without totally giving away and spoiling too much of the book, because I would recommend that people check this out. I think either Brandon Graham or Everett Glenn mentioned this too in some discussion we were having. Probably Brandon in a Formalism Friday, but this book has been mentioned on the channel before. So it's a complicated book. So I'll do my best to simplify what's going on. It starts out with a piece that in the end left me confused. I prefer the book without these first couple pages, because I was expecting it to, in the Russian nesting dolls, kind of shrink in and then expand back out to this piece here, and it doesn't. And that expectation left me confused at the end. I think if I wouldn't have had that expectation, I would have, just walked away enjoying the story. So it starts with something called Augustus E. I think that's the chapter title, and it works like either a preface or maybe a dedication, but it's got Dylan Horrocks himself receiving a letter that's saying "come back home," and it's from Hicksville, New Zealand, which is the location in the book. So you get a sense that Dylan Horrocks is a cartoonist who has left Hicksville, as well as all of the other characters. Hicksville, I don't know if it's a real place that he's mapping this onto that's actually in New Zealand, or if it's totally fictional, but it's a place where everyone reads comics, everyone's a huge fan of comics, and a bunch of cartoonists come out of there, and there's all these rare comics there that you can't find anywhere else. So it's like the cartoonist dreamland, and I don't know, given how Dylan Horrocks plays with reality, if that's a real place or if it's totally made up. But he gets a letter from someone that he doesn't know named Augustus E, and Augustus E sends a page of a comic. So already within this book, you have comics as documents within the book. And I always like documents in comics. It gets especially weird when the document is a comic itself, so then it's just a page of the book. But this is by Augustus E, and it's these people they're on an island that's moving, and they're talking to like an Aboriginal figure with all these face tattoos. And I think it's like this dreamland thing. And Dylan's perplexed, and he gets a couple more letters in the mail with artwork by Augustus E. And then one where he just gets one panel, and then it's signed to Jeffrey Dylan, and it has a date of 92 on it, and I don't know when this book was published, but that's why it seems this was published in 2001. The first complete edition published in 98. So this was probably something that he was working on in 92. I don't know. It's confusing, but it seems that's why it seems like a preface or a dedication. And then the artwork by Augustus E keeps into the actual story, and obviously the location of Hicksville does, but it never comes back to Dylan Horrocks' relationship to the Augustus E and any of the other characters, which is what I found confusing. So in my mind, it's easier to think of this as a dedication and then just start the book here, and then the story makes more sense to me. The book is about like a bunch of cartoonists, and I'll try and introduce them all. But the first one is Dick Berger, who does Captain Tomorrow Rebirth, is his big book that comes onto the scene and absolutely changes comics. He's just like the biggest thing since Jack Kirby. He's taken over the industry. He's basically bought the rights to like Marvel, and has the rights to all their characters, and is running a big movie empire. Todd McFarlane is working for him and calling him and asking for jobs, and he's harassing him. And Stan Lee, these people are in there named by their actual names. Jack Kirby and all these people are named by their actual names. Stan Lee's like trying to get Dick Berger's attention at parties and stuff like that. So that's kind of funny. And this character here, Leonard Batts, is a reporter for a comics journal type of thing. And he has previously interviewed Dick Berger and found out he came from a small town in New Zealand called Hicksville. And Berger is a bit mysterious about his relationship to his past. So Leonard Batts goes, and he's trying to go to Hicksville to interview people and find out more about Dick Berger's childhood and how he became this megastar. And Dylan Horrocks kind of switches his styles. He'll do like the surface sheen of, okay, I'm drawing like Image Comics type of stuff, and then switch into a slightly different style. That would be my biggest criticism of the book, is Horrocks doesn't actually have enough stylistic variety to pull off all of the layers within layers within layers. The art all kind of looks like the same artist, just changing mild changes to their rendering technique. I mean, the faces are a little different, but I think this book would have been cooler if the styles, if he could really nail, like, this is Jim Lee or Rob Liefeld, like really looking like it, not like a cartoonist kind of just making fun of it. So Leonard Batts is headed towards Hicksville. He meets this character, Grace, and she finds out he's a comic journalist and is real skeptical. And as soon as he mentions Dick Berger, she kicks him out. Now, when I was originally reading this, I thought that she was just taking the name Dick Berger and being like, well, like, you're joking with me or something, like, get out of my car. But it turns out she's from Hicksville, and everyone in Hicksville hates Dick Berger, and so he's gonna go there and find out why. What did Dick Berger do that launched his career, that pissed the town off? And that's the major narrative thread of the story. And once you latch onto that, all of the nesting dolls becomes easier to deal with. The most confusing thing remains who Augustus is, because now all of a sudden Batts is finding just a random Augustus panel blowing in. So he's almost, the Augustus character is almost like the god in the machine that's controlling stuff, I think, because you never meet him, and it's never explained who he is, and he quite literally leads Batts off a cliff at some point, and that's important to the story. But that never goes explained. Everything else is explained pretty well. Once he finally gets to Hicksville, he goes to the Rabbit Fiend Tea Room. Everyone in Hicksville loves comics. There's huge libraries of comics. They've got a bunch of like really nice copies of Action Comic #1, and there's a library that's full of the lost masterpieces of all the great masters, which we'll take a look at later on. So this, I think, is an obvious reference to Winsor McKay, and probably Rick Veitch as well with his Rarebit Fiend. So you get in the Rarebit Fiend, you get Sam Zabel, who now has his whole own book, Sam Zabel and the Magic Pen. He's come back. He has left. He had gone away for a year or so and was doing a comic, Moxie and Toxie, and getting paid for it for some magazine. But he failed as a cartoonist. He wasn't funny anymore. He wanted to do serious stuff and has problems with his editor. So he's back in town, and you get Pickle, which is his now mini comics that he's self-publishing, and he's handing them out to people in town, for people in town to read. So this is your first real comic within the comic is The Pickle. And it's pretty funny because it's a typical autobiographical cartoonist comic about I'm struggling with ideas and I want to do something serious and they just want me to do shit that sells. But then he's doing some of his comics within his comic, and then doing a comic about his editor not liking it. He goes to see another real life cartoonist, well, real life in the story, Tisco George, who's apparently like this genius of comics. I think like this Dave Mazzucchelli type of character. And he's in the real life of the story supposedly working on some, going to be the greatest comic that's ever made, this masterpiece of the medium that he only lets people see like one page at a time or something. And you get the sense it's never going to be finished. It's never going to be published, that kind of thing. But he goes to him for advice. So that character is mentioned tangentially. I don't think we ever see any of this character's work because you're not supposed to be able to see it. It's an unknowable masterpiece. And then within this, Sam makes a strip to show to his editor, and it's a strip about coming to his editor and killing his editor and telling him why he sucks. So it's like the angsty cartoonist strip inside of an angsty cartoonist about the story inside of an angsty cartoonist mini comic about his real life. And you're getting like 3 or 4 layers down. So I find that kind of funny. And then you get the end, and it's back to him talking to his friends, and Grace shows up, and they obviously have had a prior relationship. She's not a cartoonist. She's the only one that seems to not really be interested in comics in this comics cartoonists haven of Hicksville, New Zealand. Here's Leonard Batts. He has now had some wild experience and is waking up finally in Hicksville, falling out of bed, Little Nemo, and there's some Little Nemo images on the wall back there. So this is a very loving tribute to the history of comics and cartoons as well. He immediately finds a book I think this is by a character in the book named Emil Copen, and he reads a page of that, and then he's introduced to Miss Hicks, who's kind of runs the town, and starts to find out, oh my god, I'm in a place where everyone knows about comics. He eventually goes to the Rarebit Fiend tea rooms, and he mentions that he's writing a book about Dick Berger, and you get this jump to like a one-off New Yorker type of illustration, and it says apologies to H.M. Bateman, and I didn't research it, don't really care to, but within the context of the story, I'm left very confused if H.M. Bateman is a real cartoonist that Dylan Horrocks is apologizing to, or if this is a page from Sam Zabel's Pickle, which I think it is because it doesn't have the black, and usually the Pickle ones have the white page around it. So I think this is Sam Zabel apologizing to a fictional cartoonist, H.M. Bateman, rather than Dylan Horrocks apologizing to a real cartoonist, H.M. Bateman. But who knows? But I do get the sense this is a Pickles page. Each of the chapter introductions has what I assume is a real quote from a real-life cartoonist. So now we are in the age of comics as air by Osamu Tezuka, and kind of an Osamu Tezuka attempt at the drawing that kind of style there. A very weird sequence follows with Grace, where it seems, I don't know if Grace is like secretly drawing her own comics and not showing to them people, or if someone else is drawing it, but it's like someone's talking about what's going on in the situation and mentioning Leonard Batts and mentioning Grace in the third person. And then the styles are changing again, and the lettering styles are changing as well. And there's panels that look like they're coming from other books, and this sequence didn't make much sense to me. It didn't make sense who was doing the different art there, and it reads all the way through like one singular narrative. So I don't know if it's nesting or if these are being collaged in. I mean, it furthers the story forward, but I wasn't able to unpack where it came from. Then they look back on a time where I believe it was Sam and Grace, or at least Grace is remembering going and being a translator for somebody talking to that German artist Emil Copen. That I think it's the same artist that Leonard Batts finds when he wakes up. And this was, to me, the most interesting part of the book. Emil Kopin puts forward this theory of comics, that comics, he doesn't call them comics, he calls them, he draws maps. And they ask him what he means by that, and he says, well, maps are just abstract pictorial representations that use images and words, and they capture abstract information of some sort. And he says geographical maps, topographic maps and stuff, they capture space or represent location, and comics are maps of time. So he thinks about mapping, and he goes into a theory that's kind of like the philosopher Henri Bergson, where time is really just some kind of extension of spatial relationships, and he kind of reverses that, I think, where spatial relationships are just versions of time relationships. I wasn't quite clear exactly what was being said there. I'd have to read it more carefully and closely. But I thought that was the most interesting part of the book, thinking about comics as maps of time. And I've mentioned that a few times in the Formalist Friday Formalism videos, is this thing where comic artists seem to think about dimensions and higher dimensions and space-time relationships. Their ideas of that are very much set by what we do as cartoonists, and I don't think it's the right way to think about existence and time and dimensions and stuff, but it's a very common view amongst artists, and I really like the way it's put here in terms of being a cartographer of time, basically. Then we get a very large section here where Leonard Batts has been given, like, this much of the book. Leonard Batts has been handed by Sam Zabel a few issues of his self-published book Pickle, and it's in an attempt to explain to Leonard Batts why Dick Berger is so hated in Hicksville. Like, what did he do that everyone there hates him, and that he won't talk about his childhood? And it's, again, an autobio comic of Sam Zabel going to LA to meet his old friend Dick Berger, and being offered a job drawing not Captain Tomorrow, but another property that Dick Berger has, bought the rights to, basically, Lady Night. And they're making a bunch of movies, and Sam meets the gal playing the character. And he's introducing the woman Cincinnati who's playing Lady Night to the actual Lady Night comics, the original ones, by a character named Lou Goldman, lamenting that they no longer look like this. And then you get what I think is Dylan Horrocks doing Todd McFarlane, because Todd McFarlane's constantly calling Dick Berger, and Dick Berger's getting ready to fire him. And he's like, Todd, you're a hack. No one cares about you anymore. So I think that's him trying to do Todd McFarlane. This is what I'm talking about with his ability to move through styles. It's not like a very obvious, convincing Todd McFarlane. And when you get to like the Lady Night books, it's kind of like this bad Rob Liefeld-esque drawing. I mean, it's intentionally bad, but it's not spot on enough. Like, I would really like to see like a really good Rob Liefeld knockoff. I think that would make and when you're going into like into the Pickle stuff, it doesn't look significantly different from just the quote unquote real world stuff. I think if the styles were very drastically different, and some of them even talk about being in color, so if there was color in the book, I think that would make the kind of each level of the book, of the inception that you're going in and out of, more obvious. But it's easy enough to follow along. That was just my biggest wish for the book, is that the stylistic stuff was a little more sorted out. And so that's a big chunk of the book. And then you go back to pretty much closing up the book, where Leonard Batts then finds out what, and I won't say what, but he finds out what exactly Dick Berger did that pissed off the town, like, what social kind of not convention, but taboo he broke, that basically got him kicked out, but also led to him becoming the biggest cartoonist in the world. There's a library, which is like every cartoonist's dream, that the town maintains. And this is where the book is just pure like cartoonist fantasy. It's the place that me and everyone watching this, I'm sure, would love to go. It's a library that collects all of the unpublished masterpieces of all the greats. So Jacob Kurtzberg's Tough Guy comics, Harvey Kurtzman's The History of War, Wally Wood's Kingdom of Sorcery, Rudolph Topher, Winsor McKay, Jack Cole, Pablo Picasso. All these guys have supposedly made these comics that are collected in this library here. And that's an important part of the story. And then you pretty much wrap up the story in a more linear way. And at the end of it all, in the library, Leonard Batts is reintroduced to this book by Augustus, and that story wraps up in a way that, to me, that was the confusing part of the book. I didn't understand how that is seemingly going to be wrapping back into the Dylan Horrocks opening at the beginning. And then you get a quote I really like at the end by George Harriman, real or not, fact or unfact, it was a beautiful vision. And that was something that I thought about quite a bit while making Strange Death. Well, and then you get one more page right here, which I was hoping was going to wrap back into Dylan Horrocks, but it's Lou and Mort, the two guys like in the book that supposedly did the Lady Knight character. So I don't know. I just take the introduction as a dedication and enjoy the rest of the book. But I really like this quote by George Harriman, because that's what I was thinking about a lot while I was making Strange Death of Alex Raymond, is whether all of this stuff pans out to be true or not. Did it make a compelling narrative? Yeah. And did it make for the opportunity to do a bunch of beautiful things with comics? And I think we achieved that. So, in that sense, with these kind of meta books that play with reality and fiction, I don't think it really matters too much. It's like, did it create meaning? Did it create a beautiful vision? And I do also think that Hicksville is a beautiful vision that mixes up fiction and reality in an interesting way, and I think that's fun. And I think that comics is one of the few mediums that even bothers to do this. I would love to see TV shows that tried this a little bit more. So definitely check this out, Hicksville by Dylan Horrocks, and also check out his Sam Zabel and the Magic Pin, which I assume is kind of a sequel to this. I'd have to go find a copy of it and read it again, but check that out as well. So thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.